Arguing is both an art and a war. Since ancient times, great philosophers have dedicated themselves to understanding the mechanisms of rhetoric, persuasion, and dialectical combat. But what does it mean to destroy someone in a debate? Taken literally, the term might sound like an ego battle, a game where the goal is to intellectually annihilate the opponent. However, from Carl Jung's perspective, true victory is not about humiliating the other person, but about exposing their contradictions, revealing their psychological weaknesses, and leading them to confront their own shadow. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This quote is key to understanding how someone can be destroyed in a debate. The greatest blow one can suffer is not a flawless argument, but being forced to face truths they have been avoiding. Most people are not prepared for that. We live protected by our illusions, fragile convictions, and superficial rationalizations. When someone touches the wound of our unconscious, we feel anger, discomfort, and often resort to defense mechanisms to escape internal confrontation. The greatest triumph in a debate, therefore, is not about countering every point with impeccable logic, but about leading the other person to recognize their own contradictions. This can be done in several ways. Exposing the other person's shadow. Jung spoke of the shadow as the repressed part of ourselves, the side we avoid looking at. Often, the weakness of an argument is not in what it expresses, but in what it conceals. If you can bring to light the hidden inconsistencies in someone's worldview, they will be forced to confront aspects they would rather ignore, using the opponent's own energy against them. This relates to the Taoist concept of Wu Wei, the principle of effortless action, using the opponent's energy against them. If someone is aggressive in a debate, do not fight back with the same intensity. This only reinforces their stance. Instead, absorb their energy and redirect it through subtle yet revealing questions. Strategic silence. One of the biggest mistakes in a debate is talking too much. Well-placed silence can be devastating. It creates discomfort, forces the other person to fill the void, and often leads them to contradict themselves. Exposing contradictions. No idea is completely resistant to scrutiny. Every worldview has cracks. The key is to find the point where the other person's belief system clashes with reality. This forces them into an intellectual collapse as they struggle to uphold contradictory arguments. Now that we understand the psychological foundation of intellectual combat, let's dive deeper into these principles and explore how to apply them in practice. A debate is never just about ideas, it's about identity. When someone defends an argument, they're not merely expressing an isolated thought. They're protecting something they believe is essential to their existence. This happens because our beliefs are deeply rooted in our psyche, tied to both our personal and social identity. Jung pointed out that the human mind is composed of complexes, psychological structures that organize our thoughts and emotions. When a belief is attacked, we're not just questioning a concept, but threatening one of these complexes. That's why many debates don't end in a healthy exchange of ideas, but rather in intense, defensive, and sometimes even violent emotional reactions. If you truly want to destroy someone in a debate, the most powerful approach is not to present a stronger argument, but to attack the identity behind the belief. Here are some effective strategies. Cognitive dissonance. This is one of the most powerful mechanisms for destabilizing someone. Cognitive dissonance occurs when a person is confronted with information that contradicts their core beliefs, causing psychological discomfort. If you can present a truth that clashes with their sense of identity, they'll be forced to either reshape their worldview or deny reality. In most cases, they'll attempt to rationalize, but the seed of doubt will already be planted. Socratic questioning. Socrates used the art of questioning to lead his opponents into intellectual collapse. He didn't attack directly, but instead asked such precise questions that the other person would inevitably expose their own inconsistencies. When someone is forced to explain their position in detail, they often realize the gaps in their own logic. Psychological reflection. A powerful technique inspired by Jungian analytical psychology is psychological reflection. This means acting as a mirror for the other person, exposing their flaws without attacking them directly. If someone is arrogant, respond with unwavering humility. If they try to impose a dogmatic belief, counter it with calm, questioning logic rather than aggression. The opponent will start to feel the weight of their own posture. Strategic use of emotion. While logic is essential, emotions rule human behavior. If you can trigger a specific emotion in someone, whether doubt, insecurity, or frustration, you can push them off balance. However, this must be done with precision. If the attack is too obvious, they will become defensive and reject any possibility of reflection. The key is to create an environment where doubt grows organically. But there's a danger in this game. When you dismantle someone's certainties, you might trigger unpredictable reactions. Not everyone is ready to face the truth about themselves. And that leads us to the next point. What happens when a person is forced to confront their own shadow? If there's one thing Carl Jung teaches us, it's that no one likes to face their own shadow. In Jungian terms, the shadow consists of everything we reject within ourselves: weaknesses, fears, repressed impulses. When someone is confronted with their shadow, their reaction can be unpredictable: denial, anger, avoidance, or even an emotional breakdown. And this is where an ethical dilemma arises. If you truly want to destroy someone in a debate by exposing their contradictions and forcing them to face their shadow, you must be prepared for the consequences. Some people, upon realizing that their belief system has crumbled, may react destructively, whether by turning against you, against others, or even against themselves. One of the most common ways to deal with this internal confrontation is through projection. When a painful truth begins to surface, many people redirect that discomfort outward, attacking the messenger instead of the message. You've probably seen this happen. When someone feels threatened in a debate, instead of responding rationally, they resort to personal attacks, distortions of facts, and emotional appeals. This happens because the ego fights to preserve itself. As Jung pointed out, the ego creates illusions to maintain a sense of control and identity. When you force someone to see an inconvenient truth, they may react in one of two ways: acceptance and growth. The person acknowledges they were wrong, reflects on the argument, and begins to reassess their beliefs. This is the ideal scenario, but also the rarest. Resistance and aggression. The individual goes into defensive mode, distorts the discussion, and attacks you to protect their sense of identity. This is the most common reaction and can turn the conversation unproductive or even dangerous. And here lies the big philosophical question: is it ethical to destroy someone in a debate? If the goal is simply to feed your own ego, to prove that you are intellectually superior, then perhaps it's just a game of vanity. But if the intention is to genuinely spark reflection in the other person, then you must be careful, not just to destroy, but also to provide a path for rebuilding. Nietzsche warned, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster." Destroying someone just for the sake of it may be an act of power, but it can also be a symptom of insecurity. The true master of rhetoric and intellectual combat doesn't just defeat the other person, he leads them to grow. Now let's explore how to turn intellectual confrontation into a process of illumination rather than mere destruction. If the sole purpose of a debate is to destroy the other person, it becomes an exercise in manipulation and domination. However, a true thinker does not seek merely to win, but to enlighten. Carl Jung, in his exploration of the human psyche, understood that real growth comes from confrontation, not destructive confrontation, but the kind that leads to transformation. The most powerful intellectual clash is not the one that reduces the opponent to silence or humiliation, but the one that plants a deep seed of doubt, a spark of reflection that makes them question their own beliefs. And this can be done in a far more sophisticated way than simply trying to crush the other person with irrefutable arguments. Hegel, the German philosopher, developed a crucial concept for productive debates: dialectics. According to him, every thesis generates an antithesis, and real progress happens in the synthesis, the fusion of both into a new understanding. In a debate, you can take on two roles: the destroyer, someone who only seeks to dismantle the other person's position, exposing flaws, contradictions, and ignorance. This role may seem powerful, but it rarely leads to real change, only resistance and resentment. The illuminator, someone who, instead of simply attacking, guides the other person to realize their mistakes on their own. This can be done through strategic questioning, deep reflection, and a demonstration of empathy. Jung teaches us that the unconscious resists sudden changes. A person who feels attacked will shut down and refuse to learn. But if they are gradually led to see the flaws in their perspective, they will begin to rebuild their worldview on their own. Use inquiry, not aggression. Well-placed questions are more powerful than direct attacks. Instead of saying, "That's absurd," ask, "Have you considered the implications of this idea in another context?" Demonstrate knowledge without arrogance. People reject ideas not just because of their content, but because of who presents them. If you come across as arrogant, even if you're right, the other person won't listen. Allow for reflection and silence. Silence can be as powerful as an argument. Let the other person process the information instead of pressuring them to respond in the heat of the moment. Avoid making the other person feel like a victim. When someone feels attacked, they often take on the role of a victim, shielding themselves from the truth. Keep the discussion about ideas, not personal attacks. Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." The true goal of a debate should not be to destroy, but to awaken. Now, to conclude, let's explore how this impacts society and our own personal growth. Debating is not just an individual exercise, it also reflects how society evolves. Great cultural and philosophical transformations have always emerged from intellectual clashes where old ideas were challenged and new perspectives took shape. However, there is a fine line between a debate that fosters growth and one that merely destroys without purpose. We live in an era where polarization dominates public discourse. Social media has turned philosophical and political discussions into battlegrounds where winning matters more than understanding. This phenomenon creates a vicious cycle. Emotional reactions. Instead of reflection, people focus on reaffirming their beliefs rather than genuinely listening. Dehumanization of the opponent. The other person becomes an enemy and nuances disappear. Confirmation bias. Individuals lock themselves in ideological bubbles, reinforcing their views without ever questioning them. Intellectual stagnation. When no one is willing to change, progress comes to a halt. Jung warned about this phenomenon. He argued that when we project onto others everything we reject in ourselves, we no longer see reality as it is, but as our ego wants it to be. So, if your goal in a debate is merely to destroy someone, you might not be winning. You might just be reinforcing your own belief bubble and fueling a cycle of hostility and resistance to learning. The most powerful form of argumentation is not the one that silences the other person, but the one that makes them question their own certainties. This doesn't mean being complacent or compromising the truth, but recognizing that an idea imposed is never truly accepted, only temporarily suppressed. Instead of trying to win at all costs, ask yourself, does my argument help the other person grow, or does it just satisfy my own ego? In the end, Jung teaches us that the greatest confrontation we can have is not with others, but with ourselves. True intellectual mastery is not about destroying others. It's about illuminating both ourselves and those around us on the path of transformation. What kind of debater do you choose to be? At the end of the day, real victory in a discussion is not about humiliating or silencing someone. It's about planting a doubt, sparking reflection, and perhaps igniting a spark of transformation. As Jung teaches, those who confront their own shadow become stronger, and the same applies to ideas. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a debate where you realized the other person wasn't ready to face their own contradictions? Or maybe you've experienced this process yourself. Share your thoughts in the comments so we can dive deeper into this discussion together. If this content resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos. Here, we don't just aim to win debates, we strive to expand minds. And if this video made you think, just imagine the next ones. So go ahead, hit the like button, and send this to that friend who loves or hates a good debate. See you in the next video.